I watched a town stop breathing. Every person frozen mid-step, no blinks, no breath, just smiles carved too deep. At exactly 8 p.m., the world paused. And that's when I knew Uwe wasn't passing through. I was being absorbed. They called it Elderbrook, a place not on any map, a place that remembers you, even if you've never been there. And once it does, you never leave the same, if you leave at all. I didn't come here looking for death. I was running from grief. But this town, this lie wrapped in nostalgia, didn't just want my body, it wanted my story. And now, it wants yours. Part 1. The flat tire that led me here. I was 3 states away from anything familiar. Just a blur of pines and hills behind me, and the hum of tires on cracked asphalt beneath. Driving cross-country was supposed to be my reset button, my clean slate after everything fell apart. The funeral, the fights, the way my apartment suddenly felt too small and too quiet. I needed out. So I packed my camera, shoved some clothes in a duffel, and told myself I'd drive until I found something worth stopping for. I didn't expect it to be a nail, or whatever it was that chewed into my back tire and left me stranded on the shoulder of Route 17, somewhere deep in the mountains. I got out, popped the trunk, and stood there like an idiot. No spare, no jack, and, of course, no cell service. My phone might as well have been a paperweight. The sun was bleeding into the horizon by then, orange melting into purple. And I didn't like the way the trees pressed in around me, too tall, too dense. So I grabbed my bag and started walking. I figured I'd find a ranger station, or a cabin, or something. What I found was a sign half buried in weeds. Welcome to Elderbrook, a place to remember. It looked hand-painted, the kind of folksy charm you'd see in a retirement village brochure. I almost laughed, but then the wind picked up, and I realized something. I hadn't heard a single bird the whole walk. Not one. Elderbrook sat in a little valley, like it had been dropped in from another time. The streets were cobbled, the houses all neat and symmetrical. Every window had lace curtains. There were flower boxes full of impossibly red petunias. Gaslights lined the sidewalks, real ones, flickering softly like they were lit by hand. I could hear a piano playing somewhere. Distant, Chopin, I think. That part was actually kind of nice. But even before I saw a single person, I knew something was wrong. The air felt stale, not musty, just flat. Like everything around me had been vacuum sealed. No buzzing insects, no barking dogs, just silence. And that piano growing fainter with every step. Then the people started to appear, one by one. I turned a corner, and there was a man in suspenders, sweeping a perfectly clean porch. He smiled when he saw me, but didn't say anything, just nodded once, very slowly, and kept sweeping. Nothing. A woman in a gingham dress walked past with a basket of apples. She smiled too, said, "Welcome to Elderbrook, traveler. You're just in time for supper." Just in time for supper. I kept walking. The inn was easy to find. It was the only building with a sign out front, an old wood plank thing that read the Hearthstone in faded gold letters. I was about to knock when the door opened on its own. She stood there in the doorway, tall, thin, maybe in her 50s, pale skin, dark eyes, hair tied back in a tight bun. She smiled like the others, only hers didn't reach her eyes, not even close. "You must be tired," she said. "Come in, you're our guest now." I should have asked how she knew I was coming. I should have asked why I never saw a phone line or cell tower or even a damn satellite dish on the way in. But I was tired and cold and frankly a little shaken. The inside of the inn was pristine, spotless wooden floors, doilies on every surface, a grandfather clock ticking loudly in the corner. There was no check-in, no paperwork. She handed me an old brass key with a smile and said, "Room 3, top of the stairs, suppers at 7. I asked if she had a phone I could use. Her smile faltered just for a second, barely, but I saw it. "I'm afraid lines are down tonight," she said. "Best not to worry. You're safe here." That word stuck with me. Safe. I hadn't said anything about being unsafe. I went upstairs. The hallway smelled like lavender and something else like old wood soaked in rain. The wallpaper was yellowed, peeling in the corners. My room had a small bed, a dresser, and a mirror that was cracked right across the center. I set my bag down and looked out the window. No cars, no streetlights, just lanterns glowing faintly in the distance. No one talked. I laid down, trying to tell myself it was just a weird, isolated little town. Nothing sinister, just quaint. I even laughed a little, but it caught in my throat, because then I remembered her. The woman at the inn. She'd smiled the entire time, like her face had been carved that way, but when she turned to hand me the key, I noticed a twitch in her neck, a sudden, violent spasm, just once, like something inside her jerked the wrong string. I hadn't seen her blink once, and that piano, it had stopped playing the moment I stepped inside. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but the silence was worse than anything else. It pressed against my ears, against my skull. It was too complete, and just when I thought I might drift off, I heard it, a soft shuffle outside my door, followed by breathing, not normal breathing, wet, shallow, labored. I sat up, holding my breath, watching the gap beneath the door. A shadow passed across its low and dragging, then a soft knock. 3 times, I didn't move. Another knock, a little harder, then a voice, barely a whisper. "Are you pretending to?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet, but part of me was already afraid the answer might be yes. Part 2, don't blink, don't breathe. I woke up to sunlight seeping through moth-eaten curtains and the ticking of that grandfather clock downstairs, louder than it had any right to be. At first, everything felt fine, normal, even, but then I remembered the knock, the voice. "Are you pretending to?" I told myself it had been a dream. It felt like one, sort of, but there was something off about the air in the room, like it hadn't been breathed in a long time, stale in a way that made my lungs itch. I grabbed my camera. Old habit. I've always documented the strange places I pass through. Part of being a photojournalist, even if no one's paying me anymore. I figured I'd explore Elderbrook in the daylight and try to catch what made this place feel so off. A weird story was better than no story at all. The town looked even more pristine in the morning. The cobblestone streets were dry, every lawn neatly trimmed, every flower blooming at exactly the same stage. No weeds, no insects. It was like walking through a painting someone refused to let age. I lifted my camera and started shooting. The post office, the schoolhouse, a woman knitting on her porch, staring at nothing. A man painting the same spot on a white picket fence over and over. They looked real enough till I looked at the photos. That's when I noticed it. In one photo, the knitting woman was smiling. In the next, taken seconds later, her mouth was flat. The needles hadn't moved. Her eyes hadn't shifted. Just her smile gone, like it had been erased. The man painting in the picture, his brush never touched the fence. It hovered just above the surface. In another photo, he wasn't holding the brush at all. I zoomed in. His eyes were glassy, too wide. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe the lens had caught something at a weird angle, or maybe the shutter glitched. But I've been shooting for over a decade. I know when something's wrong in a frame. These were wrong. And then there was the breathing, or rather the lack of it. They just stood, or walked, or smiled, like animatronics stuck in a loop. I tested it. Sat on a bench across from a man reading a paper, waited 5 minutes, 10, not once did he blink, not once, and then he looked at me, not turned his head, just tilted his eyes from the paper, straight to mine. I got up and left. The diner was the only place that felt remotely alive. It even smelled normal, greasy, familiar. Bacon, coffee, syrup. The waitress, a woman in a pale blue uniform and starched white apron, greeted me with a too-wide smile. "Morning, Mr. Ross, just in time for breakfast." I never told her my name. I sat down, pretending I hadn't noticed. She brought out a plate without asking. Scrambled eggs, toast, 3 strips of bacon. I didn't eat right away, just stared at it. Everything was neatly arranged. The yolks a little too perfect, the toast unburnt. The bacon curled like it had been placed by tweezers. I took a bite. It was warm, flavorless. She stood at the counter, still smiling, not watching me, just smiling, frozen, like someone hit pause. I came back later that afternoon, just to test something. She served me the same meal, same plate, same arrangement, same blank smile. And that night, I came again. Same thing. I even tried moving tables, coming in through the side door, changing clothes. Made no difference. She moved in the same pattern, stepped in the same rhythm. The coffee tasted like water, the eggs like rubber, the bacon still curled just the same. I left without touching the food. Back at the inn, I rummaged through the drawers in the front lobby. I don't even know what I was looking for. Something real, maybe. Something old. Dozens of them, stacked neatly in the cabinet beneath the counter. Elderbrook Gazette, they were called. The paper was yellowed, flaking at the edges. The top issue read, June 12, 1973. The headline, Mayor to host summer gala. Town gathers at Hearthstone. There was a photo attached, black and white. The woman from the inn was in it. Hair in the same bun, same dress, same expression. Next to her stood the same waitress from the diner, same apron, same smile. I flipped to another paper, dated 1985, same people, then 1996, unchanged, not older, not different, exactly the same. I took one of the papers upstairs and spread it across the floor of my room. The faces stared up at me like a family portrait I never asked to be part of. My hands shook as I grabbed my camera and scrolled through. The photos I'd taken earlier, every face in those images was blank, expressionless, smiling in a way that didn't match the scene, like they weren't reacting to me or to anything around them, like their smiles were painted on for someone else's benefit, someone watching. That night, I didn't sleep. The shadows under my door moved again. I turned off the lamp and held my breath, and there it was. Time, not behind the door, inside the room. They're only pretending, it said. They don't remember how to stop. I sat frozen, the hairs on my neck stiff as needles. My fingers clenched the bedsheet like it could anchor me in place. I wanted to speak, to ask who it was, but I couldn't. My throat felt paralyzed. Then, the voice whispered one last thing, so close, it felt like it came from inside my own skull. Soon, you'll forget too. And just like that, the room went still. No more footsteps, no more whispers, just the faint sound of a piano starting up. Again in the distance, the same song as before, only now it was out of tune. Part 3, Clara's Journal. I couldn't stop thinking about that voice. They're only pretending. And then, the one that came after. The one that said I'd forget to. I told myself I needed answers. Real ones. Not theories. Not paranoia. I needed something I could touch read. Something outside of my own thoughts that proved I wasn't just spiraling. So I went to the one place that might still have some form of truth. The town library. It was late. The gas lamps outside flickered like dying fireflies, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. I waited until the last of the townspeople finished their silent walks and returned to their identical homes. I crept through the alley beside the Hearthstone Inn and made my way to the library. The building was older than anything else in town. Ivy had overtaken half its face, and the wooden door groaned as I eased it open. No lights were on inside, but I brought a flashlight. I didn't dare use it right away. Not until the door was shut behind me and I was sure I was alone. Dust hung in the air like fog. The place smelled of rotting paper and old wood, and each step I took across the warped floorboards echoed louder than it should have. The shelves were tall and narrow, the books arranged with eerie precision. No dust on the spines, no dog-eared pages, no handwritten notes in the margins. Everything felt too preserved. I wandered aimlessly for a while, not even sure what I was looking for. But then I found it. An unlabeled shelf tucked behind the genealogy section. It wasn't quite flush with the wall. I leaned in and pushed. The shelf groaned, but moved just an inch at first, then more. Behind it was a narrow doorway, like something out of an old Gothic novel. I slipped through, heart pounding, into a dark room with a single desk at the center and a pile of books that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. And there, at the top of the pile, sat a leather-bound journal. The name scratched into the front read, Clara Tao. I opened it. The pages crackled in my hands. Her handwriting was sharp, erratic in places, calm in others, like someone writing through waves of panic and resignation. It started with small musings, mentions of local folks by name, their kindness, their grief, their strange habits. Then it shifted. She wrote about losing her husband suddenly, violently, and how the townspeople had offered her a way to keep him, to remember him fully, not just as a ghost or a fading photo, but as something real, animated, present. They called it the ritual of wakefulness. Clara described how the ritual was meant to preserve the spirit through memory and repetition. The loved one's daily habits had to be remembered in perfect detail, their schedule reenacted, their expressions mimicked. The person had to be spoken of constantly, visited, fed, included. She didn't say what the ritual required, not exactly, just that it involved a binding of breath and name, and that once the ritual was performed, It could not be undone. And then came the warnings. Those who lingered too long, she wrote, began to lose their own breath. They would forget when they last inhaled. Their eyes would dry out from not blinking. Their hearts would slow. They would become like the ones they tried to keep. She called them the still ones. Her words grew more frantic as the pages went on. She described entire households falling silent, whole families who hadn't aged in 20 years. She wrote that the town no longer had birthdays, that no one ever left, that the ritual had become something else, entirely something that fed off memory. That twisted it, Clara said. Elderbrook was no longer a place. It was a performance, one directed by a force older than the town itself. She described a presence, not a person, not even a spirit, just a watching, something that dwelled beneath. The church, something that listened for names and fed on stories, something that whispered through the cracks in floorboards and stared from mirrors at night. The longer you remembered someone, the more of yourself it took from you. Her entries became jagged after that. Scribbles in the margins, repetitions, don't blink, don't breathe, don't forget, over and over. And finally, the last page. No date, just a sentence, scrawled in ink, so thick it had bled through the paper. They made me smile until my lips tore. I stared at the words for a long time, my skin crawling. Something creaked behind me. I turned, flashlight trembling in my grip. The shelves were as I'd left them, the door still slightly ajar, but when I turned back to the desk, Clara's journal was gone. It wasn't in my hands. It wasn't on the desk. I hadn't moved. And then I saw it tucked onto a shelf that hadn't been there a moment ago, nestled between two books with no titles. I reached for it, but the journal had changed. The name on the cover no longer said Clara Dow. It said Caleb Ross. I staggered back, dropped the flashlight. The bulb flickered, rolled across the floor, and died. For a few seconds, I was alone in pitch black. Then I heard the sound of paper rustling, dozens of pages turning dot, and voices whispering, soft, unintelligible, familiar. My voice, reading my own words, descriptions of the diner, of the photos, of the voice at the door. It was already being written. I ran. I didn't look back. Not even when I thought I saw a figure standing in the aisle between the shelves, head tilted, eyes open far too wide. I made it outside. The air felt colder than before, wetter, like fog had settled deep in my lungs. The gaslights were still burning, but now they were all flickering in unison, like the town was blinking together, and I couldn't remember the last time I had. Part 4. The clock that never ticks. I started keeping track of time after the journal, after my name appeared on its cover. I needed something solid, objective, measurable, something untouched by illusion. So I set my phone to vibrate every hour, even though it still showed no signal. I needed anchors, markers. It was just past 7:30 p.m. when I first noticed the silence again, the kind that feels physical, like cotton stuffed in your ears. No footsteps on the cobblestone, no plates clinking from the diner, no piano from the distance, just quiet. I looked outside my window at the street below. A woman was walking her dog. A man was pushing a bike. A child stood by the lamppost, holding an ice cream cone that hadn't melted. Then, at exactly 8 p.m., stopped. The lights in every window dimmed in unison. Street lamps flickered and held. The woman froze mid-step, 1 foot in the air. The man's bike leaned unnaturally, no longer moving but not falling either. And the child dropped the cone. But it didn't hit the ground, it just hovered. The entire town had gone still, like someone had hit pause. I stood there, my hands pressed against the glass, not breathing, afraid that if I did, they'd hear me, or worse, see me. I waited for what I didn't know. I watched the second hand on my watch tick once, twice, then nothing. It stopped, just like the town. And then came the bell, a single deep chime. It rang out from the church tower at the center of Elderbrook. The sound wasn't loud, but it reached through me like cold water as it echoed across the rooftops. The people below began to move again. The woman placed her foot down, the man resumed walking, and the child's ice cream finally splattered on the stone, but none of them reacted. No frowns, no glances, just the same smiles, returning to their faces like marionettes being pulled back into their positions. I watched as they resumed their routines, exactly where they left off. Word for word, step for step, like they hadn't noticed the interruption, like it was part of their program. That was when I ran. I didn't know where to go, just that I couldn't stay in the Hearthstone in another night. I grabbed my bag, my camera, and shoved open the front door, not even caring if anyone saw me. The streets were colder now, the air too still. I made my way down the road, toward the sign where I first entered town, toward the same crooked wooden welcome that had greeted me days ago, except the sign was gone. In its place was only fog, thick and white, clinging to the trees like spider silk. I kept walking, faster now. The more distance I put between myself and the town center, the less real everything felt. The cobblestones turned to cracked pavement, then dirt, then nothing. I walked straight ahead for what felt like an hour, maybe more, but the fog just deepened. And when I looked behind me, Elderbrook was still there, as if I hadn't moved at all. That's when I saw him, a boy, no older than 10, standing by the edge of a dry fountain. He wore a red scarf and old brown suspenders. He wasn't smiling. He looked right at me. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice almost too steady. I asked him his name. He said, "Elias." Then he said something that made my blood freeze. "You were brought here, Caleb, because Elderbrook needed someone new." I asked him what that meant. He looked past me, toward the fog. "This place is a memory," he said. "But memories fade, stories run out. That's when the stillness comes." I asked why I couldn't leave. Elias stepped closer, his eyes too sharp for a child. "Because now, the town remembers you too." He explained it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Elderbrook is Astoria performance. Every person, every smile, every choreographed step is part of keeping the town alive. Without new people to weave in, to give it fresh scenes, the whole illusion would crumble. I was a character now, a plot point. I'd walked in with my grief and my curiosity and my breath, and the town had taken all three. "You've been written in," Elias said. "You belong to the script now." I asked about the others. Were they real? Were they ever? He said they used to be, once, but most had long since stopped breathing. The ritual of wakefulness, he said, had been corrupted by the thing beneath the town, the force that listened, that craved routine, repetition, identity. Elderbrook doesn't live. It remembers. And when it runs out of memory, It consumes the closest one. I stared into Ilias's eyes and asked if he was real. He didn't answer. He just said, "You'll see tomorrow. When you wake up, you'll smile without meaning to. You'll speak lines you never learned. The fog will be inside you, too." He turned and walked into the mist, and I couldn't follow. I stood there for hours, I think, maybe longer, but the road behind me was gone. All that remained was Elderbrook and the church bell ringing. Again, 8 chimes, always 8, but the clock never ticks between them. Part 5. They're starting to use my voice. I woke up standing in the middle of the town square, shoes soaked from dew, shirt wrinkled like I'd been sleeping in it for days, and not a single memory of how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remember was shutting my eyes in the bed at the Hearthstone Inn, windows locked, door bolted, my camera beside me. I had a plan. I was going to leave at first light, walk until I hit something real, even if it took days, even if I had to crawl. But now, here I was, center of town, standing beside the dried-out fountain, with no clue how I got there. And the worst part, no one looked surprised to see me. A man tipping his hat as he passed. "Mornin', Mr. Ross." The woman sweeping her porch. "You're up early again, Mr. Ross." The same waitress at the diner who'd served me the same meal 3 days in a row. She didn't even blink. "Coffee's waiting for you, Mr. Ross." They all knew my name, said it like they'd been saying it for years, and the more I heard it, the more wrong it sounded, like it belonged to someone else now. Like the name didn't quite fit inside my own skin anymore. I went back to my room and locked the door, sat in front of the mirror and watched. At first, nothing, just me, tired, pale, stubble, thicker than usual. Then I looked away, just for a second, down at the floor, my hands. When I looked back, my reflection was still looking down, and then it smiled. Just a flicker of teeth, a tightening at the corners of the mouth. But I didn't move. I swear to God, I didn't move. I ran to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, tried to breathe, but it felt thick in my lungs, like the air didn't want to come in anymore. That's when I remembered my recorder. I'd been using it sporadically, dictating thoughts, questions, clues, anything that might help me piece this place together. I fished it out of my bag and hit play. The first few recordings were normal. My voice, disjointed ramblings, observations about the townspeople, the stillness, the journal. Then, one I didn't remember making, a voice. My voice, talk calm, smooth, too smooth. Talk saying things I never said. I've always lived in I love the quiet. I don't blink anymore. I dropped the recorder. It hit the wood floor with a sharp crack, but it kept playing over and over. I don't blink anymore. I don't blink anymore. I hit stop, yanked the batteries out, threw it across the room. It didn't matter. The voice was still in my head, looping, soft, insistent. I needed answers, something to hold on to, something to prove I wasn't coming apart at the seams. So I went back to the library, not at night this time, broad daylight. I didn't care if they saw me, if they followed. Let them. Maybe I'd lead them back to whatever was puppeteering this nightmare. I went to the town archives, a section I hadn't explored yet, buried behind a locked cabinet. The key was already in the drawer, waiting. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, black and white, sepia, full color, all labeled meticulously. Harvest Festival, 1961. Memorial Parade, 1977. Centennial Celebration, 2003. I flipped through them slowly. Faces I'd seen walking the streets. The same faces, unaged, unchanged. And then I found myself in the background at first, blurry, unfocused, then clearer, posing, smiling, wearing the same flannel shirt I had on right now. I counted the photos, 9 different decades. Always the same clothes, always the same face. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't someone who looked like me. It was me. I stared at the latest one, 2003. My hands trembled. My knees buckled. I dropped the picture on the floor, and the silence in the library closed in like a noose. Had I been here before? Or had Elderbrook written me in retroactively, planted me into its own memory? What's worse, being stuck in a place you've never escaped, or realizing you never left? I stumbled out of the library, gasping. People waved at me from their porches. A boy nodded from a swing. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ross." I ran until my lungs burned, ran until my legs gave out, and I collapsed near the edge of town, where the trees thickened, where the fog began. It was waiting there for me. I didn't step in. I couldn't. Not yet. Like breathing through a radio dot, and beneath it, voices, mine, laughing, arguing, whispering, dozens of variations of me, all saying things I never said. The town wasn't just stealing my name, it was learning me, mimicking me, rehearsing me, and the more time I spent here, the better it got at copying. I looked down at my hands. They were still mine, but for how much longer? Because the truth is, I don't know how many more times I can wake up in strange places and pretend I'm still me. I don't know how many more days I can wear this name before it doesn't feel borrowed before it fits perfectly. They're not just using my voice anymore, they're making it theirs. Part 6. Everyone here is waiting for me to die the morning of the festival. I woke up smiling. I didn't mean to. It was just there. My mouth pulled tight at the corners. My cheeks sore like I'd been grinning in my sleep. I rushed to the mirror and stared. The smile didn't fade right away, lingered, like it was waiting for something. I forced it down, but the reflection didn't fight back. It just held that smile for a second too long, and then followed me. I blinked, or tried to. Nothing happened. My eyes stayed open, dry, stinging. That's when I realized Di wasn't breathing either. No rise in my chest, no air in my lungs. And yet I was standing, awake, moving. I wasn't alive, in the way I used to be, and maybe that was the point. Outside my window, Elderbrook had changed. The gaslights burned bright, even in daylight. The streets were lined with paper lanterns that glowed with a light they shouldn't have had. Music floated through the air, slow and eerie, like a waltz played underwater. A banner stretched across the town square. "Welcome home, Mr. Ross." I didn't go to the festival. I ran past the diner, where the waitress still stood, smiling, unmoving behind the counter. Past the schoolhouse, where children sat perfectly still at their desks, their hands folded, their eyes too wide. I ran until the town thinned and the trees began. Where the fog waited, Elias was already there. He stood at the edge of the mist, like he'd been expecting me. "You're late," he said. "They're waiting." I told him I was leaving. He shook his head. "No, Caleb, you don't leave Elder. You become it." I grabbed his shoulders, shouted at him, demanded answers. A way out, anything. But he only stared at me, his voice small. "Do you remember when you last felt hungry?" he asked. "Thirsty, tired." I opened my mouth, closed. No, I said. "Exactly," Elias replied. "It's already happening. You're in the performance now. And once the town knows your story, it keeps you." I turned and ran back through the town, back to the hearthstone to the journal, Clara's journal. I tore it from the shelf in the hidden room behind the library. My name was still etched into the leather cover, burned deep like a brand. I lit a match, held the flame to the edge of the book. It caught, but only for a second. The fire hissed and died. The pages didn't burn, they turned rapidly on their own, flipping forward, page after page after page. All of them filled with my handwriting. Descriptions of every moment I thought I'd lived alone. Every thought, every doubt, every scream in the dark. They were already written, already past, and then new pages, ones I hadn't lived yet. I saw words forming in real time. Caleb drops the book. He backs away. He feels hands on his shoulders. And I did. Hands cold and rigid gripping my shoulders from behind. I turned, but no one was there. Just more smiles, filling the doorway. Townspeople packed shoulder to shoulder, grinning, wide enough to split skin. "Welcome home, Mr. Ross," they all said at once, voices perfectly synchronized. I ran, but the doorways kept shifting. Every corner led me back to the square. Every street was lined with lanterns and waiting faces. I stumbled into the center of town. The music, louder now, and there they were, all of them, smiling, still watching there, mouths open, just wide enough to whisper, "Home, home, home, home." I fell to my knees. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was too calm, too smooth, too rehearsed. It said, "Thank you for having me." The crowd clapped, they clapped, and I realized then they weren't waiting for me to die. They were waiting for me to stop remembering what it felt like to be alive, the final piece, the final breath. I don't know how long I've been here now, days, years, it doesn't matter. Time is just another prop here. Now I stand behind the counter at the diner, coffee pot in hand, shirt clean, smile perfect. I greet every new arrival the same way. Morning, traveler, just in time for breakfast. And when I turn to pour the coffee, I don't blink, I don't breathe, but inside me some small part still, screaming, still scratching at the glass remembers. They're pretending. We're all pretending, but pretending long enough, becomes something worse. It becomes forever. And now it's your turn, because I saw your car break down outside town, and I know you don't have a signal. Welcome to Elderbrook. They say if you hear Elderbrook's name more than once, it starts remembering you too. And if you're still watching, it probably already has. But don't leave yet. There are other towns, other stories, doors you haven't opened, voices you haven't heard yet. Like this video, if the town lets you out, share it before it forgets you were here. And if you're brave enough to come back, subscribe to Haunted Echoes. We'll be waiting.